In module number 4, we will be focusing on the marketing environment. Now, just like any other business function or any other organization, nothing happens in isolation. Of course, any decisions about marketing or any strategies about marketing have to consider the environment in which these strategies are made. So in this module, we will focus not only on the macro-environmental factors, but we will also focus on the micro-environmental factors. The micro-environmental factors are also called as the immediate environment for the organization. These are the factors that are close to the company. It obviously influences the company's ability to serve its customers. Now, these factors that we are talking about in microenvironment are the factors that the organization can change. They can influence to change these factors. These include suppliers, the company itself, the competitors, the marketing intermediaries, the consumers, and the public. Suppliers are integral for organizations to deliver their services. Especially in hospitality and tourism operations, they depend heavily on how the suppliers supply their materials to them. Imagine a hotel that has food and beverage operations. There's a lot of suppliers who would provide the materials. Imagine a restaurant in the same way. So suppliers are the companies or the individuals that provide resources that are needed by the company or the service provider to deliver services. In some cases, it can be very challenging. Imagine that if there's a shortage of suppliers or the material that is needed. You may have heard of the recent shortage in microchip industry that has influenced so many industries around the world. You may have also seen the news that talk about the shortage of supply chain when it was the COVID-19 timing. Most of the companies went out of many products that they were selling. So in terms of shortage, companies now are focusing on diversifying their supplier pool, just so that if there's a shortage in one way or in one area, they can then turn their face towards another set of suppliers. There's also another challenge with suppliers, and that's price jumps. So what happens if in the supply chain, any one aspect of the supply chain has a price jump? That means that the final product that is delivered to the consumer will have to take that price hike and increase the prices. So in this type of situation, many companies are now focusing on price commitments or fixed price commitments. So whether the price goes up or down in the market for the material that is needed, the final product remains with a stable price. Also, another issue that is important to consider with suppliers is the image problem. Now, you may have gone to different hotels where there's a coffee shop. In some good hotels, the coffee shop is Starbucks. Now, how many of you know that Starbucks is not managed by the hotel? It's a franchise. So it's another company that is running that operation in that hotel. So imagine you are a guest staying at a hotel, you go to Starbucks on the hotel property in the morning, you had a bad experience, you are going to blame the hotel for it. Even the hotel has nothing to do with that, that's just a supplier. But the guests don't know that. And this is why it's important for hospitality organizations to choose their suppliers very carefully, so that there's no mismatch between the supplier and the organization when it comes to delivering services. The second category here in the marketing environment is competitors. Now, competitors do also influence how a company can provide services to their customers. Competitors are the companies that are satisfying the same set of needs that you are trying to satisfy. Of course, that creates competition. Usually, the competition that we focus on is the exact same competitor that we have. However, there is different levels of competition. The first level is called product form, which is the similar products and services with similar price that you are offering. The higher level of competition, or the more broader form of competition, is called as product category competition, which means that the competitor is in the same product category. For example, McDonald's is a burger company. KFC is not a competitor to McDonald's when it comes to product form. Wendy's is, or Burger King is. However, when we think about McDonald's, the food that they are providing is fast food. So if we are thinking about the product category of fast food, then Subway or KFC would also be a competitor to McDonald's. The third category of competition is general competition. General competition includes all the products and services that fulfill the same need. So let's say if a customer is going to McDonald's to eat something, they may not necessarily want fast food. They just want something to eat in order to deal with their hunger. So in this category, McDonald's is also competing to Starbucks, because somebody can go to Starbucks and eat a cake or pastry or something. They are also competing with, let's say, the deli section in Publix or Walmart, because you can also go and get food there. So that is general competition. And then the last and the most broader category of competition is called budget competition, which means that all the companies that are competing for that amount of money that the customer is paying out of their pocket, how can we get that amount of money? So let's say if somebody is going to McDonald's to eat a burger with a meal that costs roughly around like $9 to $10. So what else can be bought in $9 to $10? It can be a movie rental, it can be watching a show in the cinema or something like that. So that's general competition. All of these are important to consider. Now we will focus on macro environment. Now macro environment is important because they do influence not only the company itself, but everybody in the micro environment. The most interesting part here is that companies have no influence on macro environment. So by hook or by crook, companies do have to change the way they are operating because of the pressures from macro environment. Now in macro environment, we have a framework called PESTLE. So it starts with political environment, economic environment, social environment, technological environment, legal environment, and all those type of things. We will talk about some of the most important ones here with some examples so that you can get a feel for this macro environmental factors. The first one is the competitive landscape of the market. So here there are two important things to consider: the barriers to entry and the barriers to exit. So let's say if I am a hotel operator, I want to see in my city how many hotels are there, because the more hotels that are in my city, the more competitive it becomes. The less room I have to provide profitable services. Now, if I'm a restaurant owner, the same applies to me, but for me to open or for somebody else to open a restaurant, the barrier to entry in the market is much lower as compared to a hotel because the cost of doing business is higher. Now, let's say if in an environment there's several companies operating for the same product and somebody wants to leave, then it would also depend on how much was the initial investment. So that's called barrier to exit. So for some industries, like let's say if you are a takeaway shop, you can easily leave the market. You can sell your stuff easily and everything, leave the market. But if you are a theme park, the barrier to exit is very high. The investment is very high. So those companies cannot easily leave the market. These two factors, the barrier to entry and the barrier to exit, determines the competitive landscape of the market, which is a huge macro environmental factor. The second factor in the macro environment is demographic environment. Now remember, marketing starts and ends with customers. So demographic environmental factors deal with the customer's demographics. Of course, in today's world, things are changing. Think about the size of the market. Think about the density of the market, the location, the age of your customers, the gender of your customers, their race, their occupation, other statistics about all this. All of that would determine who to focus on and who not to focus on. Now, of course, in the US, for example, the age structures are changing. People are living longer. That means that you have more generations to deal with. Much more younger kids are coming into the workforce much earlier. That means that you have much younger employees coming into the industry. So think about the differences in needs and wants of Generation Z versus Generation Y versus Generation X or even baby boomers. And today, out of all the times in history, we also have Generation Alpha, people who are younger than 10 years old. They also have a buying power. They also have a say in the decisions that are made in the family. So demographic environment do have a say in how things are done. In this video that I will show you, we can see how the demographic environment is changing the preferences for food in the UK. The third factor here is the natural environment. You may have heard a lot of companies talking about corporate social responsibility, about environmental factor, about sustainability issues, because we are living in an environment, and how we operate our businesses and how we are creating a footprint on our environment is an important discussion. In here, we are thinking about how do we reduce our footprint. So it brings a lot of opportunities like ecotourism, sustainability tours, and stuff like that. We also have seen destinations that are implementing sustainability pledges for people who are going to destinations to take a pledge of not to creating a lot of carbon footprint. But it also creates threats for us with over-tourism. We are creating shortage of resources. We are creating disrespectful attitude towards different destinations and communities living in indigenous places. Now, more and more companies are focusing on Go Green programs, sustainability programs, which is a good opportunity to create more businesses. Another factor in macroenvironmental environment to consider is economic factors. Economic environment or economic factors are also very important because they deal with the consumer's purchasing patterns and purchasing behaviors. In here, we need to think about how companies can deal with the changing economic issues. For example, if there's a recession, in the recession, what can companies do? In recession, of course, consumers have less spending power. So many companies go into promotional wars or price promotion or price wars and stuff like that. Now, in that type of situation, if there's a recession, consumers already do not have a buying power. And if the companies go with price wars, that means that the companies have less room to make profit. Another example here would be the AIG effect. What happened was that the American International Group that was going bankrupt in 2008 recession, the American Congress gave them $85 billion injected to keep them afloat. And right after that, they spent $400,000 on an excursion on a private island. Now, after that, what happened was there was a legislation that the companies cannot do that, which was a huge blow to business travel in the US. So, of course, economic factors do have an influence on how hospitality and service providers create business. Another factor in macroenvironmental factors to consider is technological environment. Now, today, out of any time, we have the highest rate of innovation in the world. We have new technologies coming all over, and hospitality and tourism industry is amongst the most influenced industries that are taking these technological innovations. Now, if we think about the marketing mix, which is the product, price, and place, and promotion, they are heavily influenced of how technology innovations are happening around us. So thinking about the product, for many coffee shops or hotels, offering free Wi-Fi is a must. It's becoming the basic product offering now. If we think about the distribution channels, the role of intermediaries like Expedia, Priceline, and TripAdvisor, you cannot just ignore that role. If we think about the price is all about waiting. It's all about non-monetary cost. So how we have platforms like Uber Eats and things like that that are reducing the way consumers are having non-monetary cost for things. Also the promotion, which is the online reviews, online word of mouth and stuff like that, that is changing the way the promotion was happening for different service providers. Some other factors in the macro environment are the cultural factors. Again, very important. Throughout this course, we will talk more about cultural factors or the political factors. So in political factors, it deals with all the legislations and all the rules and regulations and laws that are passed to about how the businesses are operated. One example of this would be the Lean Act. The Lean Act said that any business with 20 or more locations have to have the nutritional information on their drive-through menus. So here you see example of, again, a drive-through menu board for a service provider, and you see that there were different experiments that were done with it. So experiment number one was to think about how should we provide all the information with the price, with the calories, and how should we do the categorization. Here is another example where we see the items on the menu based on the calories that they have, under 200 calories, under 300 calories. And here's another example where we have the price, the calories, and the information about the items. So again, this was just an experiment that was done to see what is the best way of representing the caloric information, the price information, and the name of the item on the menu. Of course, they went with the item with the menu option number B, because that was the easiest to read for customers and then implementing them. But this was just an example to show you how legislation can change the way different things are done in hospitality and tourism organizations. So one important concept in macro-environmental issues is the environmental scanning. Now remember, there are three types of companies. There are companies that make things happen. There are also companies that watch things happen. And lastly, there are companies that wonder what happened. Now, of course, you don't want to be the third one. Of course, you don't want to be the third category. Second one, so-so, but you obviously want to be the first category. And the first category can only be done if there is environmental scanning. In environmental scanning, companies normally monitor all the micro and macro environmental factors. They think about how these factors are influencing the way businesses are run, and especially their marketing is run. And then they make adjustments to make sure that these environmental factors are not influencing their operations to a great deal. To wrap up, again, in this chapter, we talked about the marketing environment, we talked about the micro-environmental factors, we also talked about the macro-environmental factors with a lot of examples for you to understand.